My wife secretly transferred $250, $0 into her sister's account, convinced me it was for our future, but I just found out she's been fatting our assets into a shell company. Now she's suing me for half the estate, claiming I kicked her out to cheat her out of our inheritance. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of it all. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. My wife had always been a bit of a bitch, constantly nagging, lying, twisting stories to her advantage. She's the type of woman who can convincingly tell you she's innocent even when her lips are covered in the other guy's lipstick. That's exactly what she did when I caught her cheating, more on that in a bit. But at the beginning, everything seemed normal enough. We had a good life, or so I thought. We'd been married for about 5 years, and I'd always trusted her, blindly perhaps, because I thought she was the one. The signs weren't obvious at first. Small things, late nights on her phone, odd absences, little lies about where she was. But she's good at hiding things, and I didn't want to believe she'd do something so cruel. Then came the real shocker. I was going through our bank statements, just trying to get a handle on our finances, and I noticed a transfer of $250, $0 to her sister, Lisa. I'd known Lisa for years. She's a nice girl, but she's never had that kind of money. It was a huge sum, and told me she was saving for our future, for a house, for the kids. I confronted her about it, and she spun some bullshit about how Lisa needed it for a business venture, how she was just helping her out. I didn't buy it, but I let it go because I thought maybe I was overreacting. Then I found out the truth. What she was really doing was hiding assets. It turns out had been funneling our money into a shell company, something I'd never heard of before. She'd set it up in a way that I couldn't access or even see most of what was happening. I found documents, emails, and receipts that told a different story. She was draining our assets, and I was just a fool to trust her. The worst part, I discovered she'd been sleeping around. I found messages on her phone from some guy named Jake talking about their secret nights, how they'd meet up after I went to work. She'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. The betrayal hit me like a truck. When I finally confronted her, she everything, of course. Said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I was jealous and insecure. She called me a crazy husband, said it was all in my head, but I had the evidence. The bank statements, the emails, the texts. I laid it all out on the table, and her face twisted into a sneer. She told me I was just jealous because she was more successful, that I was insecure about her cheating. She even tried to turn it around, claiming I was the one secretly messing around, that I'd been distant and cold. But I knew the truth. I'd caught her red-handed, and there was no denying it anymore. The emotional fallout was brutal. I felt like my world was collapsing. I'd trusted her with everything, my money, my heart, my future, and she'd taken that trust and shattered it into pieces. I was furious, betrayed, humiliated. How could she do this? How could she lie to me for so long? The anger boiled inside me, but beneath that was a deep sadness. I kept asking myself how I'd missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Now I was left with nothing but questions and a burning desire for justice. I knew I had to do something, but what? That's where I am now, trying to figure out what comes next, what revenge looks like when someone you trusted turns out to be your worst enemy. After I gathered all the evidence, I realized that lies were just the surface of something much deeper. The more I dug, the more I uncovered about how she'd been manipulating our assets and sneaking around behind my back. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, one where everything I believed about her was a complete lie. The betrayal cut so deep that I started questioning everything. Our shared memories, the years we spent building a life together, the future I thought we had. It was like waking up from a dream and realizing it was just a nightmare dressed up as reality. Confronting her that night was one of the most intense moments I've ever experienced. I told her I knew about Jake, about the money, about the shell company. Her reaction was nothing short of infuriating. She rolled her eyes, scoffed at me, and said I was overreacting, that I was jealous, insecure, and just paranoid. She claimed I was imagining things, that I was crazy for accusing her of cheating. Her words stung, but I was beyond caring about her excuses. I laid out everything I had found, screenshots, bank statements, emails, and watched her try to deny it all. Her denial was so transparent it almost made me laugh. She kept insisting that I was just suspicious because I didn't trust her, that I was jealous of her success, whatever that was supposed to mean. She even had the nerve to say that I was the one cheating, that I was hiding something. I couldn't believe how good she was at lying, how she could look me in the eye and say she loved me while betraying me behind my back. I felt a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. How could she be so callous, so manipulative? The emotional toll was overwhelming. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I saw her for what she really was, a liar, a cheat, a thief. All the nights I spent thinking about our future, about the life we'd planned, seemed pointless now. I was angry at myself for not noticing sooner, but mostly I was furious at her for destroying everything. I wanted to lash out, to make her pay for what she'd done, but I knew I had to stay calm. Revenge, I realized, wasn't just about anger, it was about justice. I needed a plan, something precise and calculated. That night I stayed up late, going through every document I had, every piece of evidence. I started to think about how I could turn this around. Lies about the shell company, the money she transferred, her affair, all of it pointed to a bigger picture. She'd been planning this for a while, I was sure of it. I had to act carefully, quietly, so she wouldn't get wind of my suspicions. I realized that her ego was her weakness. She thought she was untouchable, that she could manipulate everyone and get away with it. That's when I decided I'd expose her, but not just publicly. I wanted to hit her where it hurt the most, financially and emotionally. I also knew I couldn't trust her anymore. Her words, her promises, they were all lies. The woman I thought I knew was just a facade. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a way to turn her own game against her. I needed leverage, evidence, something she couldn't deny. I started to plan how I'd confront her again, but this time with a strategic purpose. My goal wasn't just to catch her in a lie, it was to make her pay for what she'd done. I was done being the naive husband who believed in fairy tales. From now on, it was about reclaiming what was mine and punishing her for betraying everything we had built. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Greed and her lies had no limits. She was willing to ruin us for her own benefit. That's when I realized that her entire plan was based on deception, fatting our assets into a shell company, transferring huge sums of money, and lying to my face about everything. I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to act fast before she could cover her tracks further. I knew that revenge would be messy, complicated, but I was prepared to see it through. She'd betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I was going to make sure she paid the price. I didn't know exactly what that looked like yet, but I was determined to find out. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. My head was pounding and my stomach was in knots. I had spent the night going over every detail, every lie she'd told, every secret I'd uncovered. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Had played me for a fool, and I realized I couldn't just sit back and let her walk away with everything. Our money, our future, my trust. No, I had to do something, and it had to be smart. I needed leverage, proof, and a plan that would hit her where it hurt. I decided to start by hiring a private investigator. I needed someone who could dig into her shell company, trace the money, and confirm everything I suspected. I wanted to know exactly how deep her lies went, how much she'd stolen, and who else might be involved. I didn't want to just confront her blindly. I wanted to catch her red-handed. While I waited for the PI, I also reached out to a lawyer I knew, someone who specialized in financial crimes and divorce law. I wanted legal advice on how to proceed if I decided to divorce her, especially considering her claims that I'd kicked her out to cheat her out of inheritance. Her accusations were baseless, but I knew she'd try to spin things her way. Meanwhile, was acting even more bitchy than usual. She sensed I was onto her, and her attitude shifted from defensive to outright hostile. She started throwing accusations at me, saying I was controlling, paranoid, and that I was just jealous because she was more successful than I was. She claimed I was the one cheating, that I'd been hiding things from her. Honestly, I was sick of her lies, her manipulations. I saw right through her. She was trying to gaslight me, make me doubt my own memories, my own instincts, but I wasn't falling for it. I knew what I had seen, what I had uncovered. One thing she kept saying was that I was trying to ruin her, that I was just jealous of her sister Lisa's success and her own independence. That was her new excuse for everything. She insisted she loved me, that she was just trying to help her sister, that I was imagining the affair. But I knew better. I had the messages, the bank statements, the evidence of her lying about the shell company. I was starting to see her for who she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything to protect her own interests, even if it meant destroying our marriage in the process. While I waited for the pie to do his work, I started drafting a plan to confront her again. I wanted her to realize I wasn't going to be played anymore, that I had enough evidence to take her down. I also began to prepare myself emotionally. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was cunning, and I had to be just as clever. I didn't want her to catch wind of my plans before I had everything in place. I wanted to catch her in the act, or at least have irrefutable proof that she was lying and cheating. I was determined to come out on top, to reclaim what was mine, and to make her pay for her betrayal. The day dragged on, and I kept checking my phone for updates from the investigator. Every minute felt like an eternity. I was furious at myself for trusting her, for believing she was honest. But I was also determined to end this nightmare. I kept thinking about how much she'd lied, about the money, about her affair, about everything. I realized that her greed and betrayal went hand in hand, and she'd been planning this for a while. It was like a game to her, and I was just another pawn in her scheme. I knew I had to act fast but carefully. If I played my cards right, I could turn this around and come out victorious. But I also knew that once I exposed her, there'd be no going back. She'd lose everything, her money, her reputation, maybe even me. And honestly, part of me felt like that was the only way she'd learn her lesson. By late afternoon, I finally got the call I'd been waiting for. The pie had uncovered enough. Shell Company was a complex web of accounts, offshore entities, and secret transfers. She moved our assets into it gradually over the past year, disguised behind fake invoices and fake companies. The investigator confirmed what I already suspected. She was draining our savings, hiding assets, and funneling money into her sister Lisa's account under the pretense of helping. The amount she transferred, 250,000, was just the tip of the iceberg. There was far more hidden, and it was all coming to light now. The moment I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of relief and fury. Relief that I finally had proof, and fury because I realized she'd been lying to me for so long. All those nights I argued with her about money, about trust, about her secretive behavior. She was just covering her tracks. Now I knew the full extent of her betrayal. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the documents on my laptop, trying to process what I'd uncovered. Honestly, I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. I immediately called my lawyer and laid out everything. I wanted to know my options, how I could freeze her accounts, seize her assets, and start divorce proceedings if necessary. The lawyer was cautious but confident that I had a strong case. The shell company, the transfers, the lying, everything was evidence of fraud and betrayal. I felt a strange sense of empowerment, like I finally had the upper hand. But at the same time, I was sick to my stomach. How could someone I loved do this to me? To us, it was like waking up from a nightmare, realizing the person you trusted most had been planning your destruction all along. Meanwhile, was still acting like she was the victim. She came home that evening, throwing her usual tantrums, insisting she was innocent, that I was just jealous and paranoid. She said I was trying to ruin her reputation, that I was making up stories because I was insecure. I looked her straight in the eye and told her I had proof of her affair, her money laundering, her lies. Her face went pale for a second, then she snapped. She started screaming, calling me a manipulative bastard, accusing me of trying to destroy her because I was jealous of her success and her sister. That's when I saw her true face, the bitchy, manipulative side that she'd been hiding behind her pretty face all these years. She's a liar, a cheater, a thief. She's been scheming behind my back, draining our assets, sleeping with Jake, and trying to pin everything on me. I realized that confronting her again was necessary, but I had to be careful. She was dangerous when cornered, and I knew she'd try to spin this to her advantage. So I stayed calm, told her I had everything on tape on paper, and that I was going to take everything she'd stolen and make her pay. The next step was to prepare for a legal battle. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I gathered all the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, emails, and started compiling a case for divorce and financial fraud. I knew she'd fight me tooth and nail, probably accuse me of all sorts of things, but I was ready. I had her caught in her web of lies, and I was going to use that to my advantage. I was done being the naive husband. From now on, it was about justice, revenge, and reclaiming what was mine. I knew this wouldn't be easy, and I knew wouldn't go down without a fight, but I was prepared to see it through. I had to. For myself, for the truth, and for the broken trust she'd left behind. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm. I was deep into legal preparations, gathering every piece of evidence I could find and making sure I had everything lined up. Of course, was trying to spin her version of events, calling me paranoid, accusing me of trying to ruin her reputation, even claiming I was the one cheating all along. She'd always been good at lying, but I could see through her now. Her bitchy attitude, the way she snapped at every question, the way she tried to gaslight me, it all confirmed what I'd already suspected. She was a master manipulator, and I needed to be just as clever to beat her at her own game. I kept my distance, playing it cool, waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew she'd try to screw me over, so I had to be cautious. I had the evidence, I had the law on my side, and I was determined to end this mess once and for all. I also took steps to protect myself financially. I transferred some of our joint accounts into my name, changed passwords, and made sure I had access to everything she couldn't touch. I didn't trust her anymore, never again. She crossed every line, and I was done being her fool. Meanwhile's behavior became even more erratic. She'd throw tantrums, scream at me, call me names, even accuse me of cheating, but I knew the truth. I'd caught her cheating, I'd uncovered her lies about the money, and I had the evidence to back it all up. Her excuses sounded more ridiculous each time. She claimed that I was jealous of her success, that I was just trying to control her. She said I was the one sleeping around, that I'd been distant and cold. But I knew better. I'd seen the texts, the emails, the bank statements. Her lies were transparent, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. One night, she stormed into the house, yelling about how I was trying to ruin her life. She called me a controlling bastard, said I was just jealous because she was better than me. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I had everything documented, proof of her affair, her financial fraud, her lies. Her face twisted into anger, and she screamed that I was the real cheat, that I'd been hiding things from her. That was the moment I realized I had her trapped. She couldn't deny the evidence anymore. She was cornered, and I was finally ready to confront her fully. I decided it was time to take the next step. I contacted a divorce lawyer and filed for separation. I wanted her out of my life, out of my money, out of my heart. I knew she'd fight me tooth and nail, so I prepared myself emotionally and legally. I also planned to expose her publicly. She'd been so smug, so confident that she could get away with everything. But I had the proof now, and I was going to use it to ruin her reputation if I had to. I wasn't just after revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted her to see that her lies and schemes could hold up forever. The final piece fell into place when the court ordered a full financial audit. Shell Company was exposed, her assets frozen, and her plans unraveled. She tried to deny everything, but her lies fell apart under the weight of evidence. She accused me of trying to cheat her out of her inheritance, of kicking her out to steal from her, but that was pure projection. The truth was, she'd been stealing from me all along. Her bitchy attitude, her manipulations, her affair, everything was laid bare. I knew I'd won the battle, but it came at a high cost. Trust was shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces. Looking back, I realize how much anger and pain she caused me. But I also learned something valuable. Never trust blindly, especially when someone shows signs of betrayal. Greed and lies cost her everything: her marriage, her reputation, her freedom. And as much as it hurts, I feel a strange sense of relief. I finally see her for what she really is: a selfish, manipulative woman who thought she could get away with anything. Now, I'm moving forward, rebuilding my life, and trying to forget the betrayal that almost destroyed me. I hope anyone reading this learns from my story. Trust your instincts, protect your assets, and never let anyone manipulate your life the way did mine. In the end, I managed to pull myself out of the wreckage left behind, but it wasn't easy. The process of exposing her, fighting legal battles, and dealing with the emotional fallout took months. I'll admit, I felt broken at times, betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But somehow, I found a way to stand back up, dust myself off, and reclaim what was left of my life. The trust I once had in her is gone, replaced by a hard resolve that I will never let anyone manipulate me again. Looking back, I realize how much I was blinded by love and complacency. I ignored the warning signs, believing her lies because I wanted to believe in us. But her greed and selfishness proved that she was never truly committed. The money she transferred, the shell company, her affair, all of it was her way of controlling and ultimately destroying what we had. And I was just a pawn in her game. What I've learned from this experience is that trust is fragile and it must be earned every day. Never ignore your instincts no matter how much you love someone. When something feels wrong, dig deeper. Protect your assets, your reputation, and your peace of mind. People can surprise you in the worst ways, and it's better to be cautious than to be by betrayal. Now, I'm rebuilding my life, focusing on myself, and trying to move past the pain I still think about sometimes, about how she lied, cheated, and manipulated her way into my life, and I feel a mix of anger and relief. Anger at what she did, but relief that I finally see her true colors. I know I'll never trust her again, and honestly, I don't want to. I've learned that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that teach us who we really are and what we're capable of surviving. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust your gut, stay vigilant, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches us our strength. I'm living proof that even after the worst, you can find a way to heal and move on. And someday I hope to look back at this chapter of my life and see it as a turning point. An ugly, painful chapter, but one that made me stronger and wiser.